The night that changed everything did not begin with thunder or light from the sky. It began with silence, with a man alone on a mountain, carrying a restlessness in his chest that the world around him could not cure. Before we continue, take a moment and tell us in the comments which country you are watching from, and if content like this deepens your love for Islam, subscribe to this channel so you never miss these powerful reminders. Muhammad ibn Abdullah, peace and blessings be upon him, had withdrawn from the noise of Makkah, from idols carved by human hands and morals shaped by greed and cruelty. His heart rejected what his eyes saw in society, yet he had not been taught what would replace it. He climbed the rocky path to the cave of Hira again and again, not knowing that Allah had been preparing him for years, for a moment no human had ever experienced before. On that night, in the stillness of the cave, when the world below slept and the stars bore silent witness, the barrier between the heavens and the earth was torn open. Jibril descended with a presence so overwhelming that it crushed the breath from his chest and seized his entire being. He was commanded to read, though he had never read a book in his life. He was commanded in the name of the Lord who creates, who teaches, who brings knowledge out of nothingness. These were not words meant to inspire, they were words meant to transform humanity forever. When the Prophet returned home, his body shook and his voice trembled. This was not fear of death, but fear of the weight that had been placed upon him. Khadija, may Allah be pleased with her, did not doubt for a single moment. She comforted him with certainty rooted in truth, reminding him that Allah does not abandon those who uphold justice, honor kinship, and protect the vulnerable. The message had begun, not with power or dominance, but with humility, fear of Allah, and complete submission. Then something unexpected happened. The heavens closed. The presence that had filled the cave did not return the next day, nor the day after. Revelation, which had arrived with such force, suddenly stopped. Days turned into weeks, and weeks stretched into months. The man chosen to carry the final message to mankind found himself waiting in a silence heavier than any sound. This period, known in Islamic tradition as the pause of revelation, was not a moment of ease. It was a trial unlike persecution or physical harm because it struck at the heart. The Prophet did not question Allah, but he feared whether he himself had failed in some way. Had he misunderstood what happened in the cave? Had the mission ended before it truly began? These were not doubts of disbelief, but fears born from responsibility. Imagine being chosen by the Creator of the heavens and the earth, tasting the closeness of divine speech, and then feeling its absence without explanation. No new verses came to reassure him. No angel descended to explain the delay. There was only waiting and patience, which done, a heart that longed for guidance while fully submitting to Allah's decree. The people of Makkah noticed the silence. Those who mocked truth found an opening. They whispered and then spoke openly, claiming that his Lord had abandoned him, that the revelation had ended, that the message was false. Their words reached his ears during the most vulnerable period of his mission. Yet, he did not respond with anger or fabrication. He did not invent verses to defend himself. He waited, because a true messenger speaks only when Allah speaks. These months were heavy, not because Allah was distant, but because Allah was shaping his messenger. The pause deepened his longing, strengthened his certainty, and prepared his heart to carry a revelation that would descend again, heavier and more continuous than before. The silence was not abandonment. It was preparation. And though the world believed nothing was happening, the greatest transformation in history was quietly unfolding within the heart of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. The waiting did not pass gently, nor did it pass unnoticed within the heart of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. This was not the kind of waiting that comes with certainty of timing or reassurance of outcome. This was a waiting wrapped in silence, where every day dawned without revelation, and every night ended without an answer. He had been entrusted with something greater than any human before him, yet now he was left alone with its memory, its weight, and its unanswered questions. He did not doubt Allah Most High, but he feared the responsibility placed upon him. He feared failing a trust that had come directly from the heavens. He feared that perhaps he had misunderstood, or that the moment in the cave had been a test that had already passed. These were not whispers of disbelief, but the fears of a heart that understood the seriousness of divine command. Revelation is not comfort, it is burden. And when that burden was lifted suddenly, the absence itself became heavy. He would walk through Makkah, carrying the dignity that Allah had always preserved for him, yet inwardly bearing a trial no one could see. There was no scripture to recite, no new guidance to share, no words from the unseen to steady his heart. Still, he remained truthful. Still, he remained patient. He did not rush revelation, nor did he attempt to replace it with his own speech. In this waiting, Allah was teaching him something no book could teach, complete surrender without explanation. This period carved patience into his soul. It separated emotional excitement from divine certainty. It anchored his mission not in sensation, but in unwavering trust. When revelation had first come, it arrived suddenly and powerfully. Now, its absence tested whether his commitment depended on constant reassurance or on faith alone. And he passed this test without uttering a single word falsely attributed to Allah. While the Prophet endured this internal trial, the outside world grew louder. The people of Quraysh were observant, and they noticed that something had changed. The man who had once spoken of divine command now spoke no new verses. The silence became fuel for mockery. Those who already rejected the message seized this pause as proof for their arrogance. They said his Lord had abandoned him. They claimed that whatever had come to him had faded, that the heavens had turned away. Some laughed openly, while others whispered with calculated cruelty. These words were not spoken in ignorance alone, but in deliberate effort to wound. They were meant to break his resolve before his mission could truly begin. Imagine hearing such words while already carrying uncertainty. Imagine standing firm while being told that the one who chose you has left you. Yet he did not respond with bitterness. He did not raise his voice in defense of himself. He did not claim divine speech where none had come. This restraint was itself a proof of his prophethood, because a liar would have spoken to protect his pride, but a messenger waits for permission from Allah Most High. The mockery intensified the trial, but it did not define it. Allah was not absent from this moment. He was shaping his messenger through pressure, silence, and restraint. These months forged emotional strength, humility, and complete reliance upon Allah alone. The Prophet learned that truth does not need immediate victory, and guidance does not require constant signs. The people of Makkah thought the silence meant failure. In reality, it was preparation for endurance beyond imagination. Soon would come persecution, exile, hunger, and war. But before all of that, Allah taught his messenger how to stand firm when nothing seems to be happening, how to trust when the heavens are silent, how to carry faith when reassurance is delayed. This was not the weakest point of the mission. It was the foundation of its strength, because the one who can remain truthful in silence will remain truthful when the world listens. And the one who can wait patiently for Allah will never be shaken by the words of people. The silence was never random, and it was never without wisdom. Although it felt heavy upon the heart of the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, it was unfolding exactly as Allah Most High had decreed. Revelation is not simply information transmitted from the heavens. It is a weight placed upon the human soul. Allah Himself describes the Quran as a heavy word, something that even mountains would crumble beneath if it were sent upon them. The pause that followed the first revelation was a mercy disguised as hardship, a preparation before the descent of something far greater. The heart that would carry the Quran needed strengthening, not through ease but through longing. The prophet had tasted revelation once, and its absence intensified his awareness of its divine origin. There would never be confusion in his heart about where these words came from, because he knew the difference between human thought and divine speech. This silence stripped away any reliance on emotion or sensation and anchored the mission in absolute certainty and obedience. Allah was also teaching the Ummah through him, long before the Ummah even existed. Guidance is not demanded on our schedule, and closeness to Allah is not measured by constant signs. Sometimes Allah draws His servants nearer by withholding, not by giving. The pause taught patience before teaching proclamation. It taught submission before leadership. And it taught that silence itself can be a form of divine care. Scholars explain that this period allowed the prophet to recover physically and spiritually from the shock of revelation. The human body and heart needed time to adjust to a responsibility unlike any other. Revelation would soon come regularly, sometimes in rapid succession, sometimes in moments of extreme difficulty. Without this pause, the burden might have been overwhelming. Then, after months that felt endless, the silence was broken. The heavens opened once more. Jibreel, peace be upon him, returned with certainty, power, and reassurance. This time, there was no ambiguity. The connection had not ended, it had only been delayed. The return of revelation did not come quietly. It came with verses that directly addressed the pain, the waiting, and the accusations. Allah revealed words that removed every doubt and answered every insult. By the brightness of the morning and the stillness of the night, Allah declared that He had neither abandoned His messenger nor rejected him. These verses were not merely comforting, they were decisive. They shattered the claims of the mockers and healed the heart of the prophet at the same time. Allah reminded him of His past care, of how He had protected him when he was vulnerable, guided him when he sought truth, and enriched him with sufficiency after need. The message was clear. The same Lord who cared for you before will never abandon you now. Revelation resumed with purpose and direction. The mission was no longer a single moment in a cave. It became a continuous divine conversation, shaping every aspect of life. The pause had ended, but its lessons remained embedded in the character of the prophet forever. From that point forward, revelation would descend through joy and sorrow, through victory and hardship. But never again would there be confusion about its source or its certainty. The prophet had learned through silence what many never learn through words, that Allah is present even when unseen, active even when unheard, and closer than the servant realizes in moments of waiting. This return of revelation marked the true beginning of endurance. It confirmed that the mission was real, ongoing, and divinely protected. And it showed that the darkest pauses often come just before the greatest clarity. What the world mistook for abandonment was, in truth, the careful strengthening of the greatest messenger to ever walk the earth. When Allah Most High declared that He had not abandoned His messenger, those words were not merely reassurance for a wounded heart, they were a divine verdict that would echo until the end of time. The verses descended not as poetry meant to soothe emotions, but as truth meant to correct perception. The prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, learned directly from Allah that divine love is not measured by constant revelation, nor is closeness proven by uninterrupted comfort. Allah reminded him of his own life, not as a list of favors, but as a narrative of care that had never ceased. He had been an orphan, yet Allah sheltered him. He had searched for truth, and Allah guided him. He had known hardship, and Allah enriched him with sufficiency. The meaning was unmistakable. The one who carried you through every stage of your life did not suddenly turn away during the pause of revelation. These verses transformed pain into certainty. They taught that silence from the heavens does not mean distance, and delay does not mean rejection. The Prophet emerged from this period with a heart anchored in trust rather than expectation. He no longer needed constant reassurance to remain steadfast, because he had learned to rely on Allah even when no signs were visible. This moment also carried a message far beyond his own lifetime. Every believer who would ever feel forgotten, delayed, or tested without explanation was being addressed through these words. The pause of revelation became a living lesson for the Ummah, teaching that faith is proven not when answers are immediate, but when patience is maintained despite uncertainty. As the mission continued, the Prophet carried these lessons into every hardship that followed. When persecution intensified, he remembered the silence. When companions were tortured, he remembered the waiting. When victory was delayed, he remembered that Allah's timing is never careless. The pause had shaped him into a leader whose patience could not be shaken by insult or hardship. For the believers who came after him, this chapter of his life remains one of the most profound reminders of what it means to truly trust Allah. Many worship Allah when blessings are visible, but few remain firm when the path is unclear. The pause of revelation teaches that the absence of ease is not the absence of care. It teaches that Allah may be preparing the heart before delivering the gift. There are moments in every believer's life when prayers feel unanswered and guidance feels distant. In those moments, the life of the Prophet stands as proof that waiting itself can be an act of worship. He did not rush Allah. He did not complain to creation. He waited with dignity, submission, and certainty that Allah knows what the servant does not. The pause of revelation was among the darkest days of his life, yet it became one of the strongest foundations of his mission. When revelation resumed, it did not come to a fragile heart, but to a heart refined by patience and restraint. The Prophet emerged stronger, more grounded, and more prepared to carry a message that would confront empires and transform societies. From that point forward, revelation flowed through triumph and tragedy alike. It came during moments of victory and moments of loss. It descended during peace and during war. But never again would the Prophet confuse divine silence with abandonment, because Allah had already taught him what silence truly meant. The darkest days had passed, but their wisdom remained alive in every step of his mission. What appeared to be a pause was in reality a divine preparation for endurance beyond imagination. The heavens had been silent for a time, yet Allah had never ceased to watch, guide, and protect his messenger. And so the story of the pause of revelation does not end in sorrow, but in clarity. It ends with a messenger whose trust in Allah was unbreakable, whose patience was unmatched, and whose certainty carried the final revelation to the world. The silence did not weaken the mission. It perfected it.